The world recognizes Jayne Mansfield as a timeless figure who personifies charm, elegance, and the heyday of Hollywood. In the 1950s and 1960s, she became a symbol of glamour and appeal, captivating the screen with her platinum blonde hair and distinctive personality. Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter and The Girl Can't Help It are two of her films. They're woven throughout the history of Hollywood. However, beyond that brilliant facade and glittering grin lies a tale that few people truly understand, one that unfolds in the background, out of the public eye. When the glitter and sparkle wear off, what happens? How does becoming famous affect those who are left to pick up the pieces? Grief, scandal, and abandonment. Her children had to traverse a world of loss, controversy, and desertion, while Jayne Mansfield's light blazed brightly. A lady who was loved by millions, yet often missing when they needed her most, caused them to grow up in her shadow. What became of them then? What was the outcome of Jayne Mansfield's 5 children's lives? And what wounds did they bear from the lingering effects of a mother whose genius was both a blessing and a curse? Come along as we reveal the unseen tales, the struggles and the victories that lie behind the kids of one of Hollywood's most recognizable characters. The story is far more intricate than you may imagine. Luxury and fame. The renowned Jayne Mansfield's firstborn child, Jayne Marie Mansfield, seemed to have it all. She was born November 8, 1950, into the glittering world of Hollywood, the daughter of a father who was often in the spotlight and a mother who was loved by millions. Her life should have seemed ideal from the outside: opulence, celebrity, and an inevitable path to success. However, the glamorous environment in which Jayne Marie was born was tainted by the darkness that would follow her for the rest of her life. She grew up in a home filled with the best possessions money could buy. However, even with financial prosperity, something essential was still lacking: emotional support, stability, and affection. Millions of people loved her as a celebrity, but her mother was seldom there. She often felt invisible. The public's constant demands for her mother's time and attention made the little child, who had been in the limelight from birth, feel invisible most of the time. The emptiness within and the flawless outside became Jayne Marie's burden. Jayne Marie, who was just 16 at the time, had to deal with the unimaginable grief when Jayne Mansfield died in an automobile accident in 1967. The center of her world, her mother, vanished out of thin air. Her whole world appeared to fall apart, and the anguish of losing a mother at such a young age turned into a profound wound that would never completely go away. Without the lady who had shaped not only her early years but also her whole identity, Jayne Marie was forced to face the harsh realities of life. A world that was foreign and lonely. The chaos that ensued only added to her misery. Jayne Marie had to navigate a strange and lonely world since her father, Paul Mansfield, had already divorced her. She became an independent writer and performer because she found comfort in her profession. But whether she wanted it or not, the burden of her mother's notoriety seemed to follow her wherever she went. Even though Jayne Marie attempted to establish her profession, her mother's legacy continued to influence her life. She could not help but think of the world's favorite glitzy celebrity, yet this was not the lady who had brought her up. Finding her voice was made more difficult by the contrast between Jayne Marie's internal grief and Jayne Mansfield's public devotion. She never quite accepted the position of being considered the daughter of a legend, which she still is in many respects. Writer, mother, and grandmother. Jayne Marie is now a grandma, a mother, and a writer. Although she's managed to cope with the anguish, it's evident that the wounds from her turbulent upbringing still exist. Although she's developed a sense of self, her existence will always be intimately bound to her mother's. The story of Jayne Marie serves as a reminder that not everything that shines is gold, and that there may be a personal struggle hidden beneath every public persona. Her tale is one of tenacity, of overcoming the psychological damage caused by a mother whose notoriety was both a boon and a bane. It's a tale of perseverance and figuring out how to live in the shadow of a lady who, despite the world's obsession with her, could never be present. As time goes on, we come to see that her existence was about figuring out who she was in a society that wanted her to be someone else, not simply about being Jayne Mansfield's daughter. Mickey Hargitay Jr. At the age of 8, Miklos, or Mickey Hargitay, the second child of Jayne Mansfield and her second husband, the Hungarian actor and bodybuilder Mickey Hargitay, had his entire world turned upside down. Like his siblings, he was devastated by the sudden death of his mother in a vehicle accident in 1967. In Mickey's narrative, a boy is compelled to mature much too rapidly and live in the shadow of a celebrity whose fame left little room for her kids' silent, invisible hardships. Despite having a strong and encouraging father who raised him after Jayne's passing, Mickey could not escape the publicity that came with being the son of a famous mother. Mickey's early years were greatly influenced by the unfortunate loss of his mother, which he had to deal with from a very young age. He lost the lady who had been the focus of his existence, not simply his mom. The unrelenting powers of fame and the ensuing tragedy also took away the woman who had given birth to him. A quiet grief. In contrast to his brothers, Mickey appears to harbor a silent anguish that smolders beneath the surface, rather than screaming for attention. Before she passed away, the public's preoccupation with Jayne Mansfield had already started to undermine the family's seclusion. Additionally, her legacy weighed hard on her children, especially Mickey, when she passed away. Living with the reality that everyone knew her as a dazzling celebrity, but was unaware of the anguish and agony that came with being her kid, was more difficult than just losing a mother. As he became older, Mickey found it challenging to reconcile the image of his mother with the actual, often absent woman, a flawed, aloof person trapped in the whirlwind of celebrity. His mother's legacy. Like his brothers, he found himself trying to escape that shadow and start a new life. However, the heavy weight of his mother's heritage overshadowed every effort to identify himself. He felt as if he would never be able to shake her ghost thoroughly. Mickey's life was often thrown into the spotlight, despite his wish for quiet. The media produced numerous tales about him and his siblings due to their insatiable curiosity regarding his mother's passing and the events that followed. The majority of these stories were based more on conjecture than fact. Mickey had to forge his route in the following years, one that was not defined by his mother's notoriety. However, the relationship was too complex to be broken. The son of an icon. Like his mother, he initially pursued a profession in the arts, which did provide him with some comfort. However, he found it challenging to define himself apart from the family name due to the looming shadow of her achievements. The constant interest in Mickey's life as the son of a legend sometimes overwhelmed his attempts to find serenity. Mickey felt as if he was always fleeing his past, trying but never quite succeeding, because of the pressure of public expectations, the parallels to his mother, and the sadness of losing her. Mickey Hargitay Jr. now lives a much more subdued life away from the limelight. He chooses to live apart from the demands of celebrity and stays mostly hidden from the public. His path, however, is a monument to resiliency, the capacity to bear the weight of significant loss, to live with the ghosts of the past, and to still have the fortitude to go on. A story about survival. Even though his mother's passing was a life-altering event, Mickey's tale was one of survival rather than mourning. The continual difficulty of creating a new identity while dealing with the legacy of a mother who could never be there completely, as well as the quiet battle of growing up in the shadow of tragedy. Mickey's childhood, characterized by both quiet resilience and a profound sense of loss, teaches us about the emotional toll of being a celebrity's child, as well as the harsh realities of growing up in the spotlight. Like his brothers, he has a backstory that goes beyond the glitz and celebrity that accompanied his mother's name. It's about his quiet struggles to identify himself according to his standards, and there is grief and a silent victory in it. Zultan Hargitay. Like his brothers, Zultan Hargitay, the third child of Jayne Mansfield and Mickey Hargitay, was influenced by the dark side of both tragedy and celebrity. Unlike his elder brothers, Zultan, who was born in 1960, was able to avoid much of the spotlight. He accepted a more subdued existence away from the limelight as an adult. His narrative is a testament to the courage of choosing a different course in life, one based on individual strength and independence, rather than one of public sorrow or scandal. Zultan has gone through the same sorrow and grief as his siblings as he grew up after the untimely death of his mother. However, he decided to react to it differently. Zultan looked intent on making a name for himself away from the Hollywood legacy, while Mickey and Jayne Marie struggled with the burden of their mother's reputation. He found solace in a private life. He didn't want to stay in show business, and he didn't strive to take on the role of celebrity as his elder brother did. Rather, Zultan took comfort in living a private existence away from prying eyes. Although Zultan experienced intense anguish at the loss of his mother, it was his inner strength that enabled him to overcome the turbulent conditions of his early years. Zultan discreetly separated himself from the Hollywood industry as his brothers battled their issues, sometimes overshadowed by their mother's reputation. Peace and stability. He was able to pick a life that was entirely his own, which made his journey much more self-directed. Zultan sought stability and tranquility, while others craved attention and approval. Throughout his adult life, Zultan's existence contrasted sharply with that of his brother's public personas. He was well aware of the costs associated with fame and loss, which is why he wanted to live out of the limelight rather than being rejected. By eschewing the demands of Hollywood, Zultan created a life that prioritized his family, happiness, and personal development over the never-ending quest for public acceptance. His decision to live out of the limelight was a conscious attempt to regain his own identity rather than a rejection of his mother's legacy. The potential for healing and reinvention. Zultan's life serves as evidence that healing and reinvention are possible even in families characterized by tragedy and the pressure of celebrity. He refused to let his previous tragedy control his future. Instead, he discovered a method to appreciate life's more subdued and peaceful moments, creating a meaningful and satisfying future for himself. Although the world may place restrictions and expectations on us, Zultan's journey serves as a reminder that ultimately, each person must choose their course. Zultan's life now is quite different from the public's. Married and living a quiet life, he's happy to avoid attention and live his life as he sees fit. Zultan's tale is one of choosing serenity above fame, while his siblings manage to deal with the pressures of celebrity. A quiet beacon of hope. In many respects, he's a silent ray of hope, evidence that one can rebuild, find satisfaction, and live a genuine life even after experiencing tragedy. The life of Zultan Hargitay is a powerful illustration of fortitude and independence. Despite the turmoil and loss that characterized his early years, his choice to lead a quiet and peaceful life demonstrates that strength and healing often originate inside. It serves as a reminder that while we cannot alter the past, we do have the ability to decide how we will move forward. The narrative of Zultan's journey is one of hope, inspiring us all to examine ourselves, find healing, and create a life free from the baggage of the past, one that represents our true selves. Cimber. The youngest of Jayne Mansfield's 5 children, Antonio "Tony" Cimber, was raised amid a hurricane. Tony was born in 1961 to Jayne and her third husband, Matt Cimber. A complicated web of family dysfunction, tragedy, and celebrity influenced his childhood. Tony had a distinct challenge, growing up in the wake of his mother's untimely and terrible death when he was just 6 years old. While his elder siblings battled the burden of their mother's fame, Tony's early years were more about surviving a turbulent and chaotic home life than enjoying the public's admiration, in contrast to his brothers. An overwhelming sense of loss. He felt an incredible feeling of sorrow once his mother passed away. However, Tony's sadness was exacerbated by a profound comprehension of abandonment, unlike that of Mickey or Jayne Marie. Tony felt alone and unsure of his role in the world after Jayne passed away, and his parents' complicated relationship. Being the youngest meant that Tony's elder siblings, who were also struggling with their issues, received a lot of the emotional support and attention. Tony had to cope with a broken family, without the stability that may have aided in his recovery. While his siblings were mature enough to start paving their paths, he seemed to be in a state of limbo as a result of his mother's celebrity, which had shown such an intense light on the whole family. He could neither claim an identity that was entirely his own, nor was he fully acknowledged as the kid of a celebrity. A life away from the cameras. Tony did not pursue the same public trajectories as his siblings as he got older. He wasn't as interested in the entertainment business as Mickey or Jayne Marie had been. He preferred to live a tranquil life away from the spotlight. Nevertheless, the legacy of his mother still hung heavy. The expectations that came with being Jayne Mansfield's kid were unavoidable, no matter how hard he tried to avoid them. Tony was forced to live his life under continual scrutiny because the public preoccupied his mother, which prevented him from having the solitude he needed to recover or develop fully. Tony's quest was essentially one of trying to find normality in the middle of upheaval. His mother's passing left him with an unfiltered void since his family was anything but normal. A life based on his choices. Tony never tried to live up to the expectation of becoming the next big thing or carrying on his mother's heritage. Tony desired calm more than notoriety or attention. He made an effort to break free from the renown that had imprisoned his family and establish a life centered on his own decisions rather than his mother's reputation. Tony decided to lead a more secluded life away from the limelight, away from the media spotlight. He sought comfort in his private life. Even though he was often linked to his mother, he made a conscious effort to separate himself from the heritage that had so much influenced his family. He didn't want the tragedy of his past or the demands made of him due to his mother's identity to define him. A low-key life. Disengaged from the chaos and celebrity that characterized his childhood, Tony instead created a life on his own. Tony is now a reclusive guy who prefers to keep his private life out of the spotlight and has a modest existence. Tony's life is proof of his tenacity and resiliency despite all that he's been through. Even while he may not have publicly followed in his mother's footsteps, his capacity to find serenity and move on from the pain and loss says a lot about his character. Tony's narrative serves as a poignant reminder that not all conflicts are waged in public. The most difficult battles are often the ones that go unspoken. His choice to live according to his terms, despite the looming shadow of his mother's legacy, shows that we can all make our own decisions, even when the past seems to dictate our future, in the silent times when one must find the fortitude to heal. The death of his mother may have defined Tony Cimber, but he has finally managed to live, recover, and go on with calm dignity. Mariska Hargitay. Mariska Hargitay, the youngest of Jayne Mansfield and Mickey Hargitay's children, has a moving and inspirational tale of overcoming hardship. Mariska was born on January 23, 1964, and her life started in the background of celebrity. She experienced the devastating death of her mother at a young age, much like her brothers. Mariska was only 3 years old when she was thrown into a world without her mother, the one person who had shaped her early years. It's hard to understand the effects of such a loss at such a young age, but it set the stage for Mariska's resilience, a trait that would influence the rest of her life. Warmth, love, and guidance. The tragedy of Jayne Mansfield's passing completely upended the family. Mariska, who was still very young, had to face life without her mother's warmth, love, and guidance, while her brothers were old enough to start navigating the complexities of their sorrow. But her narrative did not stop with this tragedy. It was only the start of an incredible journey that would take her not just to a place of personal healing, but also to one of advocacy and empowerment for others. Mariska's life was anything but easy in the years after her mother passed away. Being the daughter of a well-known actress, she was subjected to intense public scrutiny from a young age. Mariska would have to deal with the strain of being Jayne Mansfield's daughter for the rest of her life. Honoring her mother's memory. Mariska, however, did not let the burden of her mother's past define her. Unlike some of her siblings, instead she decided to transform her sorrow and feelings into something bigger, something that would enable her to both respect her mother's memory and leave her legacy. Mariska chose to follow in her mother's footsteps and pursue a career in acting. However, she had an apparent reason for doing so. She wanted to establish her reputation in the entertainment industry rather than follow in her mother's footsteps. Her big break came when she played Detective Olivia Benson on the popular television series Law & Order SVU. In many respects, the character of Olivia Benson reflected Mariska's strength, a woman who conquered personal issues and fought relentlessly to serve others while facing enormous hurdles. A symbol of resilience. Mariska saw this job as an opportunity to represent not just a fictitious character, but also a part of herself, one that had persevered through hardships, battled sadness, and became a symbol of fortitude. But there were challenges along the way. Mariska had to contend with the constant emotional strain of growing up in the spotlight of her mother's celebrity, in addition to the difficulty of establishing herself as an actor. There were times when she thought the parallels to Jayne would torment her forever, that the larger-than-life image of the lady who came before her was always obscuring her own identity. Acknowledging her mother's influence. Mariska, however, resisted letting this history consume her. Instead, she decided to accept her mother's influence while continuing to follow her path. Mariska became a vocal supporter of victims of domestic abuse and sexual assault as her career took off. She established the Joyful Heart Foundation, which provides support to survivors of abuse. For Mariska, who had witnessed the experiences of many women and children affected by these problems in her role as Olivia Benson, this work was deeply personal. A stage for self-healing. Her charity gave her a platform to heal herself in addition to enabling her to assist others. She utilized her voice and power to make a profound impact on the lives of trauma survivors, transforming her suffering into a purpose. Mariska Hargitay is a living example of the strength of recovery and resiliency. She's an advocate for survivors of abuse, a philanthropist, and a successful actress. More significantly, however, she's a woman who has discovered a way to live in her reality, one that respects her mother's memories as well as her development. Her tale serves as a reminder that despite unfathomable loss, there's always a way to get back up, start again, and find strength. Mariska's story serves as a potent reminder that we may choose to overcome whatever challenges we encounter and discover a way to live a meaningful life. Celebrating her heritage. To remember her mother and encourage others to persevere when things seem unclear, she honors her past while establishing her legacy. Mariska Hargitay's tenacity, bravery, and resiliency show that we are capable of overcoming obstacles in life. The terrible backstory behind Jayne Mansfield's stunning smile and shining character was unknown to the public. Although fame gave her riches and affection, it also damaged her children's lives. Few people can comprehend how their lives were altered by public expectations, paparazzi, and Hollywood stardom. Although the world saw Jayne Mansfield as the epitome of blonde beauty, her children lived in a troubled household that was rife with tragedy, scandal, and mental suffering. Monitored and denied. Notoriety both helped and hurt 5 of Jayne Mansfield's children. They were denied the joys of childhood and watched by the media. Their mother's fame limited their ability to discover who they were by opening certain doors and closing others. The burden of a heavy heritage, the emotional toll of growing up in a broken home, and the agony of losing their mother at such a young age were all concealed from the world. Behind every red carpet appearance and tabloid shot lay a more profound, more subdued sadness that only they knew. Legacy that is inspirational and a warning. Jayne Mansfield left behind a legacy that is both inspirational and a warning. It demonstrates that while celebrity might attract attention and appreciation, a person's quiet ability to face life's most difficult obstacles is what makes them unique. Her children's tales serve as a reminder that, despite the wounds caused by the past, there's always room for growth, reconciliation, and eventually the establishment of a new legacy, one based on love and resilience rather than celebrity. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more similar content. Thank you.